From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show.
Yeah, here we are rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show, 91.7 KLZR, voice of the Wet Mountain Valley, also heard as a podcast around the world. My name is Matt West. I am here to hang out with you, talk cars, and I got a fun show in the works for you. Coming off of a week break for me. I took some time off. I am refreshed, I am rejuvenated, and I am here and ready to regale you with more stories about the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. The race has come and gone. We learned a lot of stuff. There were some crashes. There was terrible weather, and it was spectacular and fun all at the same time. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to delve into some other topics. We're going to talk about Ferraris. Yeah, I'm going to take a whole segment of this episode here to clown on some Ferrari owners because I'm not cool enough to own a Ferrari. So this is the least the least I could do. It's going to be fun. Going to talk about NFTs, and again, had such a fantastic week. I will say, I did take some time off, a whole week off from the show. If you are wondering, hey, where was the show last week? Well, there wasn't one. I know. And I was taking time with 4th of July being a week ago now. Of course, here in the United States, we celebrate Independence Day. We celebrate our departure from King George III. And I will say, hey, maybe it's a little weirder for some of my listeners in other countries. I know I have a lot of listeners in Europe, and it's one of those things that, you're like, why did all the Americans just disappear on the 4th of July every year? That's, hey, they take it off. Well, yeah, that's why. And it's a great time, though, to enjoy some fireworks, to spend some time with family. I did all of the above, and of course, did some fun car stuff, too. I did go to look at a trailer on 4th of July that I was debating buying, and then, well, what can I say? I bought it. It was way cheap. It's a project trailer. It's a car hauler. It's been sitting in the woods for 15 years, and it needs love. But I did buy it because the reality is most of my cars don't run most of the time, and occasionally I need to move them when they're running or not. So anyway, that's what I did with my 4th of July week. And I hope you had a great 4th of July week as well, enjoying fireworks, enjoying maybe some smoky burnouts. There was a burnout competition going on that I drove by. I went up to visit some friends in Denver, and just driving by, there was a parking lot on the side of the freeway, and there were like 30 cars there, all doing burnouts, and it was I had to just slow down and kind of pull off for a second to watch it. It was great. So that's America there. We do that sort of fun stuff. So anyway, now what I want to get into real quick here, before we talk about hill climb, before we talk about any of that stuff, NFTs. Oh boy. Yep, I've talked about NFTs before. If you're unfamiliar with them, they are non-fungible tokens. And essentially what that means is it's a digital way to authenticate a file, an image, a JPEG, if you will. It's a way to have digital art that allegedly is supposed to be uncopyable, or you could still screenshot it, but no, you don't have the little code, you don't have that NFT, that token to go with it to prove its authenticity. I think this whole thing is ridiculous. But the latest thing to get NFT'd, is that a word? Is that a verb, an adjective? I don't know, but it's a word now. We'll make that such. But it's a Corvette. And what's impressive about this is Chevrolet debuted a NFT of the C8, I almost said C6, that's a little while back now, the C8 Z06, and it's a image, it's a JPEG, it's a C8 Z06, it's in bright green, and it's drifting through the artsy, animated-looking city streets of a, I don't know, sort of vaporwave, cyberpunk aesthetic. It's not particularly that striking of an image to me. I will say that. It's not my flavor. But the fact is that Chevrolet, for this NFT, and they're not the first manufacturer to start selling NFTs of their cars. Acura did this recently with the Integra, the new Integra. They put this NFT up for auction for $238,000. What? Oh my gosh. So yeah, bidding started at 206 Ethereum, which at the price set during the time bidding, crypto has taken a big hit here even in the past couple of days. That stuff changes every day. RIP my crypto wallet. I don't want to think about it. But anyway, yeah, basically $238,000, which is a significant quantity more than buying the actual Z06, which hasn't gone on sale yet, but for the 2023 model year, reportedly, it's going to be in the $90,000 range, which is a lot of money, but that's also a lot of performance for less than $100,000. That's actually really good. That's a pretty good performance bargain right now, especially because this Corvette is absolutely nearing, high-end supercar levels of performance. It totally is. But still, paying $238,000 for an okay picture drawing, essentially, of this Corvette, that's a steep ask. And would you believe it? If nobody bought the NFT, nobody got it. Literally no one. Yep, the bidding fell flat. No one bought this. Everyone said, I think everyone is growing wise to this NFT stuff. I think a little bit of it is kind of a fad. It's incredibly expensive for what it is. I do get where Chevy's coming from by saying, let's make some rare NFTs of our cars and just hire a digital artist to draw our car doing something, do a drawing of it. And yeah, because it doesn't cost $238,000 to pay a digital artist to do a sketch of this car and then do it up in Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, whatever their tool of choice is. That's not $238,000, but it's an NFT. It's rare. There's only one. Yeah, you can totally screenshot it. But the fact is that we can do this on the cheap and then sell it for a lot of money. I think that's what they're trying to do. But the hype around this has totally waned. I think no person realistically has looked at this NFT and said, I would rather have that than buy the Corvette. And I'd rather have that than buy 2.5 Corvettes. Because the fact is, for the price of this NFT, you could buy the car that the picture is of and have tons of money left over, a significant quantity of money left over, and then you could go out and enjoy the art of the car every day that you walk into your garage. Because I'm sorry, cars, I know you agree with this. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here a little bit. But cars are absolutely art. There is no way around that. Sure, the design of it is art. You have designers and artists who design the cars. But the engineering is also art. Because the engineers, that's the underappreciated art of these cars. The designer has to come up with a design, and then the engineers, they have to design that car around what the engineers tell them they can do. And then the engineers have to then take that design and then actually make it work in real life. You have to be able to drive it. It has to be able to be reliable. It needs to be durable. It needs to serve its function, whether that's as a sports car or whatever. And importantly, you need to be able to build it too. So you have a whole team of developers devising ways to manufacture the car in this style and make it work. I think the engineering of these cars is just as much of art as the design of the cars, because without one, you can't have the other. I'm just saying, you can't have a beautiful car without the designer who, drew it up, but you also can't have it without the engineers who made it a reality. And I think that cars are art. Fight me on it. I know you won't. Maybe someone will. I don't know. Anyway, hey, we got more stuff coming up. I am going to give you the whole rundown of how the hill climb went. And it was interesting, it was sketchy, it was cold, and it was a whole lot of fun. And I'll tell you about that here, coming up in just a second.
At the Speed Council, getting things done fast is our priority. We do everything fast, from driving, working, sleeping, and eating.
Someone help, he's choking!
This is Tim.
Hello.
And by the time this ad is over, he'll have bicycled across the earth 69 times. Nice. Even if our name sounds unfamiliar, you know our work. F1? Pfft, child's play. The world's first supersonic jet? Yup, that was us. Apollo 11? Also us. The fastest animal in the sea? Hell, we even wrote the Wikipedia article. Fast. And we're so dedicated to speed that we've genetically engineered the world's first hyperspeed speed machine. With this scientific breakthrough, you can download your favorite automotive podcast a whole day early. How's that for fast? Patreon.com/Throttlewarrior. Donate now. Download the show early and receive special perks. This message approved by the Speed Council and the Church of Fast Things.
All right, here we are rocking it for the second segment of the Automotive ADHD show. Matt West here. I want to thank you for joining me on this amazing edition of the show as I regale you the tales of my experience at the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. Oh boy, it was exciting, but before we get to that, those car sounds were courtesy of Jeremy Schaff. That is his 2017 Honda Accord with a K24 and a 6-speed manual. Oh yeah, you know how I love those cars with the manual transmissions. Honda makes such a nice manual. And yeah, you know, I love it. I love it. Jeremy, thank you for sending those car sounds in. You will be entered for a chance to win some interesting stuff. Regular listeners of the show know that I give away the Automotive ADHD keychain as well as a $25 gift certificate to your favorite parts store. Now, that said, I would normally have pulled a winner at the beginning of last week's show, but as there was no show, what I'm going to do, though, is Jeremy, everyone else who sent in car sounds this past month, I'm going to ask you to hang on just a tiny bit longer because I got a new prize in the works that hopefully will be ready here for the end of this month, and I will do the drawing then. I could either do it now and give you the regular stuff, which is good, but if you want to wait just a little longer, I got something else cool in the works. In addition to all this, I'm just adding stuff to the pile of things that I'm giving you for sending car sounds in. So it is very cool. So hang tight. I will do the drawing here towards the end of this month instead. So there we go. Now, of course, if you do want to send those car sounds in, facebook.com/automotiveadhd. Also, Matt at throttlewarrior.com. Oh, yes. Now, let's get on to some of the hill climb stuff. I have been heavy on this topic for the past month. It is such a big event that happens every single year, and now it has come and gone, and I can kind of tell you some of my thoughts of how it went, what happened, and it's very cool. And you know what? I'm going to... You know, some might say, oh, you're hitting on this too hard. It's been a whole month, but that's okay because this only happens once a year. We've got a whole nother year now until some more Pikes Peak hill climb action. So what we're going to do is we'll soak it up while we can. Now, that said, I was on the mountain. So you heard the show where I did it. I did the show live from the Hill Climb Fan Fest. That was on the Friday before the race on Sunday. So I go up Sunday. And I have myself kind of positioned, stationed. I was part of the media going in as well. I had a fancy orange vest and had to attend all sorts of safety meetings where they told me how to not get run over by a race car. I did bring my camera, and I got some neat shots up there, some neat audio, some good stuff, but I didn't do the show from up there. I just wanted to get a little bit of media, a little bit of what I could. But I went up there, staged out of the Devil's Playground area, which is a kind of nickname for the area near the top. It's kind of a little parking lot area up there near the top, and it's very high up. You're above tree line. You're so high up that trees do not grow there. They do not. That's what they mean by tree line. It's very high up. Over 13,000 feet at that point as you approach the last 1,000 feet to the summit, which is 14,000 feet above sea level, which, again, for my friends in other countries who use a lesser unit of measurement, that is 4,267 meters. Gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we could all just agree on one unit of measurement, one that just made sense? Hope you could catch the sarcasm there. But anyway, it was fun though. So the thing is, what you got to realize is during practice week, and myself being part of the approved media that was allowed to go into the race, I was also allowed to attend the practice days, which I did, and I got to see Jimmy Ford racing out there with his Bronkzilla. Oh my God, that was cool. Of course, he was absolutely ripping it, setting some great section times in his Bronco on those practice days. And if you do look for that Bronco, it was featured recently in the drive. It was very cool. Again, big congratulations to Jimmy. He's doing big stuff. You will notice on the back window of that Bronco, this very show's logo. It's just a little bit of an Easter egg, you know? Keep an eye out for it. It's really cool. But again, I really have to commend Jimmy on the stuff that he was doing. But before I get ahead of myself, the conditions on race day were terrible. Oh my God. The conditions during qualifying were amazing. It was so nice out. In fact, the mornings were perfect. Just those crisp, cooler summer mornings in the mountains. The air was crisp. It wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold, and no wind, nothing, a warm sun at your back. I mean, the practice days were perfect. You could not ask for better conditions than what we had on the practice days. That said, race day comes along. The temperature drops 20 degrees at the starting line. It is foggy. You can't see 30 feet in front of you, if that. And then it's really cold fog, too. And bear in mind, yes, it is the end of June, but on the mountain in the month of June, there is snow. You are so high up. The air is so much colder at that altitude. And also through the fact that the air is less dense up there. There's a number of challenges that make Pikes Peak the most challenging hill climb in the world. There's other hill climbs that are maybe, dare I say, more technical, but that's even a stretch. But that said, it's one of those things that sure, maybe there's different sections of road that are more challenging, but I don't think there's a single race in the world that has as much unpredictability as Pikes Peak in terms of conditions, weather, the road conditions too. The road itself changes every year because of the freeze-thaw cycle. The ground freezes, thaws, expands, contracts over the course of a year. So you might have ran it last year if you're a driver, and then you run it again the next year, and there's new bumps and cracks in the road that weren't there before. And when you're going 120 plus miles an hour through those sections in a race car, those new bumps can catch you off guard. So it is a very demanding race, and the weather is very unpredictable. And now myself, we got in to our position. I was there with a buddy, and we got up there at 4:30 in the morning. It was going all the way up the mountain was brutal because media was supposed to have earlier access in the night, but all the general admission folks decided to come at the same time, be early. All the general admission folks came in early, clogged up the whole gate to get in. So we got there at 1:30, didn't get up to our spot until about 4:30 in the morning. And once we got up there, the fog was so dense. It was cold. There was snow on the ground. The road was wet, borderline icy. Wasn't too slippery yet. And but it was pretty slick. I mean, and I was driving my daily, the Automotive ADHD Tacoma. Got a big old sticker on it now, but that's the only thing that makes it Automotive ADHD. It's a stock Tacoma. What can I say? But that said, it is. I was driving that, and I was able to kind of feel the road just even at 20 miles an hour. I'm like, gosh, this is gonna suck the race on. This is gonna be brutal. And so anyway, I catch a few hours of sleep in the truck. 7:30, the cars start rolling. Get woken up by the race cars. The sun is out now. Well, I say the sun is out. I mean, it is impossibly foggy. The fog is just lighter now. There's more light going through it, I guess. It's brighter out. Not so much. We didn't really see the sun all day. But, I mean, hey, you know what? Fog or not, the first cars started going up the mountain. They started racing and immediately running into conditions up top. It was wet at the bottom, dry at the middle, and then wet at the top again. It was very strange. So that makes an interesting challenge. Randy Popst, one of the drivers, he was driving the Tesla Model S Plaid, and he made the comment that it was very difficult. And on his YouTube channel, which I love Randy's YouTube channel because he really, goes into the ins and outs of the racing that he does. He gives a full race commentary on his run up the mountain. I would suggest you check this out, but he talks about the challenge that they had to decide whether or not to run rain tires specifically designed for racing in the rain because, okay, those tires are going to be better in the wet sections, but in the sections of the mountain in the middle that are just inexplicably dry because, again, you can't predict the conditions on this mountain, then it's dry, and those tires that are formulated, the compound, the rubber, the tread is all designed to run as efficiently in the wet. Well, that doesn't work as well in the dry now. So you lose grip in the dry to gain grip and safety in the wet. And they ultimately made the decision to run the rain tires because the bottom was going to be wet and the top was going to be wet. And the middle, they just had to put up with what they had. They just had to deal with the fact that the tires were not operating optimally in the middle of the race. And now that also brings me to another issue caused by the rain, which is the rain, the fog, all of that, which is driver visibility. It was a big problem. There were a couple of crashes, and I was, in fact, just a couple yards down from one of them, Will A. Young's drive in his Honda Civic, his 9th gen Civic. I mean, we heard that crash from Devil's Playground, but we couldn't see it. He ended up missing a corner and clipping the edge of a road and then tumbling several times, managed to land on the road itself. At least he didn't go down an embankment. But again, the conditions were very bad. And there's another crash. I will get to it here. I am just going to kind of unpack this whole day that happened because it was fun. I want you to know what this was like to be there. I will say at 13,000 feet where we were, not quite at the summit, it was very cold. The windshield in my truck was fogging up. It was terrible. And again, you drive up before the racing happens, and yeah, you're doing 20 miles an hour instead of 120, but you get a feel of, okay, I kind of understand what these drivers have to put up with a little bit. I won't claim to understand what they have to put up with, but I at least got a snippet. I got a little tiny little sliver at a lower speed of, wow, this is going to be tough. This is tough. So, but the fogging was a major issue because you have to, whether or not you have traction and you're in the dry section of the race or you're in a wet section of the race, it doesn't matter because your visibility is terrible. All of the drivers are having to maintain slower speeds so they could see corners coming up. And one major issue that was presented in the Teslas, there were two Tesla Model S Plaids running, one of them being driven by Randy Popst, and the other one was being driven by his name rather escapes me, but it was another driver going with his. Two different Tesla Model S Plaids, and the issue, the present issue that happened was that the touchscreens in these cars are modified for racing. They have roll cages, all this stuff, but otherwise the interior is kind of stock. Yeah, they don't have carpet. They tore some of that stuff out, but the dashboard and everything, you really need to leave all of that stock to operate the Tesla hardware and be able to control all of the functions of the car, which are all routed through a touchscreen, a big center dash touchscreen. Everything on the car is done through that. And I've complained about that before, not just in this context of racing. I think buttons are superior to touchscreens, and a lot of the industry is following along with that. Some manufacturers are going more heavy on touchscreens. Other manufacturers, like recently one of the lead designers at Stellantis, which owns, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, and all that stuff, they actually said, we're going to start pushing towards more physical controls again. The touchscreen stuff is novel, it's cool, it's a fad, but it doesn't make as much sense. And I would agree with that, especially because the issue here on Pikes Peak was, for instance, for Randy Popst, his windshield started fogging up, but he had issues actually being able to turn the defroster up. The defroster controls were in the touchscreen, which is all but impossible to operate with the thick racing gloves on and even being able to reach that touchscreen. And the problem is, too, it's a touchscreen. You have to visually look at something, see it, and then touch it to change that function. That just doesn't work while you are racing. Like, while you are pushing a car to its limits, you're now also contending with fog and poor conditions, and then just to even think you have to take your eyes off the road for half a second to look at the screen and tap where something should be. You don't have that physical button or knob that you could grab. If it was a normal car with physical controls, you could be keeping your eyes on the road, reach down and grab the climate control knob and turn the fan speed up. You could do it by feel, which is something you lose with the touchscreen. And and the other driver, his name just came to me, Blake Fuller, was one of the other drivers running a Tesla Model S Plaid. And he said, and I have the quote here, he said, quote, "I felt like an older person trying to program a VCR in the middle of my run," end quote. And then he also goes on to say, "It's a combination of pressing the buttons and scrolling wheels. It's like juggling." And he says, quote, "I don't juggle well." That's a great way to put it. That is a great way to put it. And for the younger audience, VCRs, the tape players. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm not. It's a car show. I won't explain what a VCR is. But having said that, that's one major challenge that I think a lot of drivers faced was the fogging. And then that also presented an issue with these Teslas and the touchscreen controls. Now, moving on from that, there was another crash that was rather spectacular. And I can say it was spectacular because the guy, not only did he walk away, he drove away from it. Yep. There was one of the drivers, and he was he was running his course. It was Levi Shirley, number 81, and he was running in a more of a I can't remember what the car was. It was more of an open wheel car. I didn't see this. I was too high up to actually see the car itself, to see this crash. But and there's a great video of this. I will go ahead and post a clip of this on the Automotive ADHD Facebook page. You have to see it because it is brilliant. He's driving through the corners. You see all the fog. You really see the conditions the drivers are having to put up with. As he's driving, his car has no windshield. He's just got the visor on his helmet, and he's periodically taking a little microfiber towel and wiping the fog off of his helmet. Well, no, so he ends up missing a corner because of the fog, and what's funny is he misses the corner, understeers through the corner, goes off an embankment, tumbles into a set of trees, but then, he goes over. The car flips like twice, but it miraculously landed on its wheels, and the dude, without missing a beat, without even taking a second to gather his bearings, no, he was right back on it, grabs the wheel again, throttle down, full power, powers back out of this embankment in the trees onto the road after rolling the car twice, and gets back to the race. I mean, his time was probably knocked out by a couple of seconds at best. And Levi Shirley ended up finishing with a time of 13:44, which was, no one had good times on the mountain at all. That is a very commendable time, especially considering that he flipped his car and kept going. While I was at the top there at Devil's Playground, we didn't have any cell signal or anything, so I was relying on the radio broadcast on one of our local radio stations here, KRDO. They do sort of a play-by-play coverage on the radio of the race, and it's over AM, and that's all I could pick up there at the top of the mountain. Again, no cell signal, nothing. I was relying on their broadcast, and I'm listening to it up there, and they say, yeah, he went off the course, but miraculously landed on his wheels and kept going. And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Is that racing or what? And after we heard that on the radio, I said, I got to wait until somebody posts a video of this. And sure enough, the onboard footage was published a little bit later. And it's just as cool as it sounds. Yeah, Levi Shirley, got to give a big shout out to him for some incredible driving there. That's awesome. You know what? Again, that's racing. That's the sort of spontaneity that you have racing Pikes Peak that you lose a lot of that in other forms of motorsport. I, on this show, have been critical in the past of Formula One and how sanitized and how safe and how everything has to be so specific and to the rules. And now, Pikes Peak here is a complete departure from that, and Pikes Peak to me really embodies the spirit of motorsports. And guys like Jimmy Ford, who work a 9-to-5 job 5 days a week, and on the weekends work on their race car so they can go participate in one of the biggest, most dangerous, most well-known, most acclaimed hill climbs in the world. And that is fantastic, and I love that. So without going too far into the rest of this here, I guess I can, conclude that the Pikes Peak experience was incredible. I loved it. This was my first year actually attending the race on the mountain, especially as media as well. Again, I was able to get access to a couple areas on the mountain that you're not normally allowed to go to as a spectator. I mean, for better or for worse. I mean, I didn't get hit by a race car, so that was good. There was one other crash that I mentioned earlier, Will A. Young in his 9th Gen Civic. That was incredibly strange because what happened with that crash and being there, I was just a little ways past, I'd parked at Devil's Playground and I was on the side of the road just a little ways past it, barely being able to see the race cars, barely catching any footage with my camera because at the time the fog was so thick. And that was so strange. When he crashed, he goes flying by. And then in the distance, you hear what sounded more like wind, just a whooshing noise. And it's like, what was that? And then you hear some other people talking who had, radios and stuff like that. Were like, oh, there's a crash just past Devil's Playground. And then I realize, holy crap, I just heard him crash. I just couldn't see him crash. Had there been no fog, I would have had clear visibility to that. And it was even challenging, too, because some of what I heard, from listening to the play-by-play radio broadcast as I was trying to catch little details here and there, was that the race officials were having a tough time finding him. His car tipped and landed upright in the road. Well, he flipped several times, like nose over tail, but ultimately the car came to a rest in the road. And at least we can joke about this a bit because he walked away uninjured. So, of course, that's good. I think most folks here can appreciate the fact that there were no really substantial injuries or, heaven forbid, deaths on the mountain this year. Despite the conditions, nothing truly tragic happened, which is good. You can rebuild the race cars. You know, if you die crashing a car, that's not good. You know, as long as you survive, that's always good. That's what I've heard talking to hill climb drivers, that they say, you know what, we want this time, but honestly, as long as we finish, we're happy. We will leave happy, and that's what happened. Honestly, you know, there's with this crash with that Civic, you know, again, he managed to walk away, but the race officials, because of the fog, had a tough time finding him. They had to go slowly up the course because they could see their visibility was so low that they didn't want to accidentally run into him, you know, because, you know, they didn't want to accidentally crash into him with the safety car because they couldn't see him. So they had to take it really slow, really easy, and go from there. And it could have been a lot worse had he gone off one of the cliffs. There are many cliffs. There are many, many places that are much worse to crash than that. And had he gone down one of the cliffs, well, you go 20 feet down that cliff, and because of the fog, you can't see anymore. So that's one part of the danger with this, was that if someone actually went off the edge, you'd never be able to find them. Not till the fog cleared, and heaven forbid, you know, if they weren't conscious or if they were injured badly, they would be down there unable to signal for help, and you just wouldn't be able to find them. So that is one danger with running in the fog. I don't know if they will run in the fog as substantially next year. I really don't. There was a lot of talk during the event of shutting it down. A lot of drivers. And I heard this secondhand, but to me it sounded like it was either Reese Millen or Rod Millen, one of the Millens. Because the father-son running there, Rod Millen running the old school Tacoma that used to race Pikes Peak, and then Reese Millen running a Porsche 911. But it was one of them, and I heard, you know, just kind of hearsay that they, you know, Millen was saying that we should stop racing here. You know, one of the drivers was really complaining, saying, hey, I finished the race, but this was dangerous. We need to stop. And they didn't stop the race, and no one got hurt, so that's good. But would they make the same decision next year? I don't know. When do you, it would be great if I could, reach out to some of the race officials, actually, and I may do this, to get a follow-up. Like, where do you decide to put a halt to the race? Because you have, the whole race is filled with professional drivers. These people have raced in the rain before. Guys like Jimmy Ford have raced on dirt for most of their career. They're no strangers to racing in low traction conditions, but racing in the fog with low traction adds a whole nother dynamic of danger to it. It's just impossibly dangerous. And, you know, again, you have to credit the drivers who did this for pushing through it and saying, we're going to race anyway, and we're going to take the risk, and we're going to do it. Is it the right decision? It's not my decision to make, ultimately. It has to be the decision of the guy behind the wheel. Does he want to do it knowing the difficulty of the conditions? So overall, though, I think it was a spectacular event. Would I attend again? Oh, yes, I would. I would absolutely do that. And you can expect me to do it again next year. And now that I also kind of, having done the event, having taken the show out to the Fan Fest, done that live, it was great. And I learned so many lessons, too, of some different things that we can do that just to make stuff even better. Next year is going to be even cooler than this year. It was something as cool as a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but the cool part about it is it's not a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It's going to come around next year, and we get to do it all over again, and I am really, really stoked for that, and I can't wait to follow up with some of the teams, the drivers, and provide you a little bit more insight into the race. I know we're not going to beat the hill climb thing entirely to death. We're not going to do that. We're going to kind of get back to some more of our regular program stuff. That's, the usual mediocrity that you are used to hearing here. We'll get back to that. I promise you that. It'll be good. But it's just cool being able to take you along for this ride. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I do want to thank you for coming for the ride. It's a lot of fun. So anyway, I have one more segment of the show. Oh, yes, I do. And we're going to talk about some Ferraris. Speaking of rain, speaking of fog, speaking of things getting crashed, well, this all happened, but not at Pikes Peak, and it was very expensive. I'll tell you about it here, coming up in just a minute.
And now for how things work with an engineer.
Engines. Spin.
And that was how things work with an engineer. For more of how things work, go to patreon.com/throttlewarrior.
That is Nikos and his, as we would call in America, Acura TSX. Very fun. His is very modified. Lots of fun. Just a great, enjoyable daily driver. Makes lots of good noises. Could you hear the induction noise in that? That was awesome. So he is a former winner of the Car Sound of the Month, but that is a new car sound that he just sent in. I'm just saying, hey, if you've got more car sounds to share, please do not restrain yourself from sharing those. And even if you won, look at it. I got a lot of folks who've won, and they keep sending stuff because we enjoy it. I am on a quest to play everybody's car sounds on the radio and also on a podcast on this as well. And as you know, this show does happen on the radio, 91.7 KLZR, voice of the Wet Mountain Valley. If you do want to catch it, that happens Saturday mornings, 10 o'clock here in Southern Colorado. But you know what? For the rest of us, we enjoy the podcast. I think there's a special place for both the podcast and the radio show. And they both do different things. You know, the podcast, you can listen to it anytime, anywhere. And you know what? That's a fantastic. If you really want to hear me that badly, please, you can do it more than you can hear me more than I want to hear myself if you want to do that. I don't know why you would, but just saying. So anyway, now what I want to talk about here is some other interesting stuff. We've really gone to town with all the Pikes Peak stuff, so I just want to look at something kind of fun here. So and we got two different Ferrari stories to talk about. There are some very collectible and expensive Ferraris that exist, the Monza SP1 and SP2 hypercars, and they are beautiful roadsters. It's a Ferrari that comes from the factory with no roof and no windshield. This is a modern Ferrari that I'm sure you've seen them. They are gorgeous. They are beautiful. They go back to the old roadsters and sports cars of the 30s and, you know, the really early roots of motoring and racing. And you pay a lot of money. You pay a whole lot of money to have this roofless experience in a sports car. I mean, come on, if you want the roofless, windshieldless experience, I don't know. You could buy a Jeep, I guess. But it's no Ferrari. It's no Ferrari. And for instance, the Ferrari Monza SP1 is about $1.8 million. And it's roughly based on the Ferrari 812, mechanically speaking, but the body is entirely different. Again, gorgeous, gorgeous car. And, it's not a car I've ever seen in person myself. It has the iconic V12 engine in it. I feel like fewer and fewer Ferraris are offered with the V12. So the Ferrari Monza, again, very cool car. There's only 499 of the SP1 Monzas that were ever built. And, and we're talking, again, the multi-million dollar mark, almost multi-million, $1.8 million. And but there is an owners meeting that happens with the Ferrari Monza. The, I guess, Ferrari Monza Owners Club, you could say, gets together and does a little bit of a meetup. And I'm sure it's full of expensive stuff and wine and cocktails and hors d'oeuvres and fancy things, people who smoke cigars and pipes that are very expensive and, enjoy fine wines. Yeah, not my crowd, essentially. These people would they would stick their nose up at any car that I own. Let me just put it that way. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I don't need a $1.8 million car that I can hardly drive. Just saying. And, if it rains, you're screwed. You don't have a roof. There's no top you can put on. Which does bring me to exactly what happened. Is that foreshadowing? I think that's foreshadowing. What happened is there were 80 of these cars sitting out in the rain, and they got rained on. They were at this event. I guess no one checked the forecast. These million-dollar car owners, not one of them thought to check the forecast for where they were meeting up. And they get all the cars parked out at this beautiful racetrack. Oh, it's gorgeous. It's And then it rained. The heavens just opened up and started dumping on these cars. People are scrambling to get inside, to get anything to cover up their interiors. Didn't end well. Lots of very rare bespoke Ferrari Monzas got rained on. The interiors, just think of the expensive Alcantara that you optioned into this thing when you bought it. Yes, you checked off the option box. Sure, the car MSRP's for $1.8 million. With options, though, those options, like, this is the kind of car where you have, like, a carbon fiber interior, trim set. I'm not speaking for sure here, but this is the sort of car where you'd expect, the little carbon fiber bits on the option sheet, in the interior. It's like $150,000 option, It's absurd stuff here. And that said, much of the interior of these cars is carbon fiber. So, I mean, at least carbon fiber isn't as susceptible to getting wet. I think carbon fiber can handle that. And that said, though, the carpets, the Alcantara, all got soaked. And what can you do? You know what? If it was my car, oh well, it's a car without a roof. I'm sure Ferrari thought that through. I'm sure it's designed to get wet inside. Oh, yeah. I say that sarcastically. I say that tongue firmly planted in cheek. But yeah, you would think that Ferrari would, knowing they're building a car that is not designed to have any sort of roof. Again, these aren't convertibles. They are windshieldless roadsters. And there's no roof. There's no nothing. Maybe you have a special little option cover you can get to put over the interior. But, I mean, when you think about these people spent, $2 million essentially to experience vintage motoring in a modern Ferrari with modern Ferrari performance. And you know what happened in vintage motoring back in the day is it rained and you got wet. That's what happened. So I guess all of the owners complaining, oh, no, my car got wet. Well, actually, you paid for that. You paid to have that old school motoring experience, which includes getting rained on, because no one who had a sports car way back in the day probably worried too much about it. They said, well, it's made to get wet. Nothing in here is going to get hurt. It's fine. It's going to be okay. It'll dry out. Then again, cars of yesteryear didn't have complicated interior electronics and touchscreen displays and screens in the gauge clusters and stereos and speaker systems. So, but hey, there you go. My take is that you wanted to spend $2 million to have a vintage motoring experience, which includes getting rained on. So they got what they paid for. I don't know. Speaking of more expensive Ferrari stuff, I got one more Ferrari story for you to wrap up with today. I'm just having fun. I've been able to just recharge a little bit after this past week, get a little more sleep during race week on the hill climb. You don't get a lot of sleep. So I am ready and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to keep going with Ferrari stories like this, a Ferrari 250 GT. Am I just clowning on Ferraris today? I don't know. Maybe I am. Maybe I am. It's the the GTSWB bread van, which is a one-off car that has a historic story behind it, which I won't get too far into the provenance and the history of this car. But the bread van was purpose built. Essentially, what happened is the guy who commissioned this car to be built was named Giovanni Volpi. I'm probably butchering that name, but regardless, he wanted a car like this from Ferrari, but at the time, Ferrari didn't make a shooting brake kind of car. The reason it's called the bread van is because this isn't just a regular, kind of fastback 250 GTO. It's not. The 250 GTO, bear in mind, is a brilliant car, and it's very expensive now, very collectible. One of the most expensive cars to ever be sold at auction was a 250 GTO. But back in the day when these cars were new, this gentleman, Giovanni Volpi, wanted to have an unusual one. He wanted a shooting brake style car, which you may know what I'm talking about when I say shooting brake, but it's essentially, think of it like the back of a wagon. You have a sports car up front, but then instead of sloping down with a fastback roof, it goes into a big blocky area and goes straight down towards the tail of the car. Makes it look kind of like a little wagon, or like maybe like a hearse. A hearse is a good way to, well, it's maybe not the most tactful way to explain it, but that is essentially what a shooting brake sports car is. It's a two-door, but it's got this back section that comes down. They're honestly really cool. Callaway, the Corvette modifier, recently, a few years back, made a C7 shooting brake Callaway Corvette, and it was really interesting. They're odd-looking cars, and that's what this is. And this car has such a distinctive look. It was custom built on a 250 platform, and it had a streamlined body built in that shooting brake style, and it was unusual, even for Ferraris at the time. This was a one-off car. So it became kind of famous, and people dubbed it the bread van because of that weird shape that it has. And anyway, the gentleman who is racing it now, which I do respect this. You have the guy who owns this car now, essentially has one of the most expensive collectible Ferraris in existence, and he takes it racing in the Le Mans Classic, which is where a bunch of other very wealthy people say, I want to experience vintage racing and vintage motoring. Does this sound familiar? I want to experience this, and I'm going to pay a lot of money to do it, except they actually go racing, and they want to go experience motoring and motorsport the way it was experienced near 70 years ago now, or hell, even 100 years ago now. I mean, some of the first Bugattis that were raced darn near 100 years ago now. So they want to experience that, and they actually do it. I respect these gentlemen who probably have more money than me, or anyone will ever see, and they take these incredibly expensive cars out and race it. Well, unfortunately, the bread van was crashed at the Le Mans Classic, and it was spun into a tire wall, sustained some pretty heavy damage to the body. Now, bear in mind, though, this car is worth about $30 million. I can't imagine the sinking feeling you get crashing your track car at a local track event, your Miata. Oh, you got like 10, 20 grand into this car. You took a cheap car and you put a lot of money into it to make it a race car. You crash it. Insurance doesn't cover it because it's on a racetrack. Well, imagine that times 1,000, because, this guy crashed a $30 million one-off custom Ferrari with a big, big history. Now, it's not the first time it's been crashed, so it has been repaired before. And you know what? With the estimated value of $30 million on this car, that probably means it's going to get rebuilt. Someone's going to rebuild it. This car is going to continue to go on. It's only going to go up in value now, because in another couple decades, and the history plaque on this car as it's being sold at auction next, we'll talk about, it was crashed in 2022 and, racing, and it's part of racing, and, it's all official. And yeah, you know what I mean. Though, again, it is fun to kind of muse at the the misfortune of these Ferrari owners. In a little bit of a way, it is. I'm not taking a jab at Ferrari. I think Ferrari is a fascinating car. I think, they make an amazing engine, especially those Ferrari V12s. If I was presented with the opportunity to own one and could afford to do so, I can't say I would turn it down, though, strictly speaking, I mean, hey, they're not Ferraris aren't my style. They're nowhere near broken enough and janky enough for me to want to touch them. But having said that, I do commend the folks who have these cars and they race them. If you're a regular listener of this show, I am all about using cars the way they were meant to be. The way that instead of put them away and collect them and wait for them to go up in value and then go put them on Bring a Trailer. I am staunchly against that sort of tactic with cars. I think they should be driven. I think they should be enjoyed. And that's what we do with them. And that's what this, the guy who owns this car, I don't know if he was driving it. A lot of times the owners of these very expensive classics aren't the ones driving it. They have a professional driver they've hired to race it, and then they spectate it like you would horse racing or something. But having said that, at least this car was getting driven. That, to me, means that the value of this car was not that it's a collectible. The value of this car was that it was able to perform a certain task, perform a certain feeling, a certain experience. And it continued to do that up until the day that it was wrecked. And you know what? I guarantee they're going to rebuild this thing. This car is not done yet. This car, though, in terms of going out in a blaze of glory, it's better, I think, to have been crashed racing than, rot away in a collector's warehouse and being unmaintained and having the seals dry out and just collecting dust. That's not what these are for. So, is it a tragedy that such a rare car was crashed? Sure. Is it expensive? Absolutely. Is it bad, though? I don't think so. This is, in a weird, convoluted way, it's almost better that this is how this car, gets used. You know what? Because at the end of the day, $30 million or not, it's a car. and it's meant to be driven. That is my final say on this edition of the Automotive ADHD show. And now I do want to thank you for joining me here. Again, coming back after a week off. Hopefully you enjoyed your week, 4th of July, all of that stuff last week. And of course, I do want to thank you for listening and sending car sounds into the Facebook page, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. I also want to thank all of the people who made the hill climb stuff possible and helped me out with that. It wasn't just an endeavor with myself. So many friends were a part of it. I got to give a shout out to Devin for doing a burnout with his scooter in the middle of my live show at the Pikes Peak Hill Climb Fan Fest. That was amazing, by the way. If you want to hear that, you know where to find it. The podcast episode directly before this one. Go check it out. If you haven't listened to it, you are missing out. And of course, you are listening to the correct car show. So, hey, there we go. I will see you same time, same place next week when I need to watch more movies to come up with things to put at the end of this. I don't know. I got to do it. I'm slacking off. So, there you go. I'll see you then.